Hey, what's up everybody, it's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're looking at more card reveals for the new Gwent The Tide Rises expansion coming out July 11th. There will be 6 new cards released for each faction, not including neutrals. Today we'll be looking at Syndicate, starting with the new common card, the 4-power, 4-provision Aquarantia Deckhand, which is a human pirate with a Vice 3 boost self by 1 ability. And Vice is a new keyword. It means that we trigger that ability whenever we spend the specified amount of coins, then immediately reset that counter so that when we spend that number of coins again, we will repeat that ability. That means that although the deckhand starts at just 4 power, if you play it on a turn where you already have 9 coins and spend all those coins on the same turn that you play the deckhand, then you'll trigger that Vice ability 3 times, boosting him up to 7 points for 4 provisions in 1 turn. That's about the usual value you get for 4 provision cards, so that's not bad, but it does require decent setup because you need to have a lot of coins to make that boost happen. But the interesting thing here is that the deckhand can be both a point slam and an engine, because if you have lots of ways to generate additional coins, then you can get lots of boosts on this guy very quickly. In fact, it could be 3 points every turn, in which case that is a very strong engine. And unlike most engines that you need to play early in the round to give them time to power up, the deckhand is nice in that you can still play it mid-round and get really solid value. And if you have additional ways to gain more coins in the middle of your turn, like say from destroying a unit with a bounty, or triggering the coin generation from Open Sesame, then it is actually possible to get more than 3 points on the deckhand in 1 turn. But the other really nice thing about this card is that besides generating and spending coins, which is something you already wanted to do in any Syndicate deck, you don't have to go out of your way to set up the deckhand. So that means that any Syndicate deck that generates and spends coins quickly could make use of the deckhand as a low to no effort add-on, forcing your opponent to make a difficult decision. Do they answer the deckhand because it will get boosted, or do they instead focus on the coin generators and spenders who are also engines and who are setting up the deckhand? So for all those reasons, I think the deckhand could be a really solid card, especially because at 4 provisions, there's very little risk to using it. Then we have the new Syndicate rare card, the 3-power 5-provision Magpie, which is a beast pirate. It profits 2, and then has fee 1, spawn a Syndicate crown on this row, cooldown 1. And at first glance, you might look at this and say, this seems really weird, because in a vacuum, it's basically 5 points for 5 provisions, the 3-point body plus the 2-point profit. And its primary ability, the spawning the Syndicate crown, is a net 0-point play because you spend 1 coin to gain 1 coin. So why would you ever want to do that? Well, by itself, yes, that is net 0 points. However, this card does not exist in a vacuum because there are several cards that benefit both from spending that coin and from gaining that coin when you click on the crown. Spending the coin gives you a small way to set up your Vice cards, and then clicking on the Syndicate crown to generate a coin sets up cards like Bincy and Townsfolk. And that also means that it increases the maximum number of coins that you can spend in 1 turn. Because usually, since you have a 9-coin cap, it can be difficult to earn and spend more than 9 coins in 1 turn. But Magpie gives you a way to consistently earn and spend 1 more coin per turn without relying on playing a card or using your leader ability, which will help a lot for some of the cards we'll talk about in just a minute. So at first glance, I'm sure a lot of people will look at Magpie and assume that this card is terrible. But it seems like in almost every expansion, we have some cards that don't work very well by themselves, so people underrate them, but they are a very important setup for the bigger cards that get a lot more attention. I'm thinking of things like the Eternal Eclipse Deacon, which a lot of people thought was trash when it came out because they had not yet realized how important that was to set up the Eternal Eclipse scenario. So don't rule out the Magpie just yet, because this might be a similar situation. Using that fee ability also gives you a way to get down to exactly 0 coins at the end of your turn every turn, giving you a consistent way to set up cards like Eveline and Casimir, 2 cards that are very powerful when they get set up, but at least until now, it was very difficult and clunky to do that. Then we have Ishora, not sure how to say that, an 8-power, 8-provision rare card that is a human pirate unit with Vice 6, destroy the lowest power enemy unit. So at a minimum, obviously this plays for 8 points, which for a worst case scenario isn't bad. But that Vice 6 ability is potentially amazing. If you have a lot of coin generating engines, or you played a big profit card on your previous turn, then it should be pretty feasible to activate that Vice ability on the same turn that you play her. Sure, if you're going against a swarm deck, then maybe that means you're destroying a 1 or 2 power token, but in most cases that's probably worth at least 4 points, potentially more, especially because it could help you destroy an engine before it gets the chance to set up. And if you have enough coin generation to trigger that Vice ability multiple times, then you might be able to destroy your opponent's lowest unit every turn. And that might even mean that you wipe the entire board. And like with the deckhand, one of the interesting things about this card is that Vice ability makes it almost a passive engine of sorts. Because to set this up, you'll need other coin-generating and coin-spending cards, and if your opponent focuses too much on those, then they might not be able to stop Ishora. And in some situations, if you started the turn with a lot of coins, and have other ways to generate additional coins mid-turn, then you might even be able to trigger this Vice ability twice in the same turn. The tempo could be amazing. Once again, that means bounty decks could be a great fit. Just imagine what could happen if that Vice ability destroys a unit with a bounty, as well as in Search of Forgotten Treasure scenario decks. Then for the second Syndicate epic card, we have Mercenary Contract, which is a 7-provision special crime with profit 5, spend all of your coins, then play a unit from your deck with a provision cost up to the number of coins spent, meaning that this is a tutor. So first of all, as tutors go, 7 provisions is very inexpensive. Most reliable tutors, like Royal Decree, cost about 9 provisions, and 8 provision tutors, like Alzur's Double Cross and Marching Orders, are generally much less flexible. So for this to be a 7 provision tutor is great value. One of the reasons why it is so cheap is probably because it does require that you spend coins to use it. So if you have 0 coins when you play this, you could play a 4 or 5 provision card, which you might be fine with doing if, for example, you really need a bronze engine. And then if you want a mid-range card, you're going to need to already have a few coins when you use Mercenary Contract, and of course, because you can only have 9 coins at most, that means that you can't tutor out anything that costs more than 9. But to me, it seems like saving 1 or 2 provisions on a tutor more than makes up for what is not that difficult of a restriction to play around. In addition, if you already have a bunch of Vice cards on the board, then Mercenary Contract gives you a great way to spend a bunch of coins, triggering those Vice abilities. Then the first Syndicate legendary card that we have is the Aquarantia, which is a 6-power, 12-provision machine ship with profit 6. That means that at a minimum, this is playing for about 12 points for 12 provisions, and if that's the worst case scenario, then that's not so bad. But then we have this Vice 10 ability to play the top card from your deck. And obviously, anything that can play additional cards can be really strong. However, Vice 10 is a ton. But that's not just some arbitrarily huge number. Importantly, that is precisely 1 more than the maximum number of coins you would be able to have at once. So that means that even if playing the Aquarantia gets you up to 9 coins, and you spend all those coins immediately, you still won't quite reach that Vice threshold. At least, not unless and until you play 1 more coin on your next turn. That is, unless you already have something on the board like a Magpie that can spend a coin to gain a coin that gives you a way to get a quote-unquote free Vice counter every turn. So as I hinted at before, Magpie may not have looked that good by itself, but when played with the Aquarantia, gives you a much more reliable way to spend 1 more coin per turn to reach that Aquarantia Vice threshold, even on the same turn that you play it. That way you're getting 6 power, 6 profit, playing the top card from your deck, and definitely trigger whatever other Vice abilities you already have on the board, in addition to the Aquarantia. Then if you can keep the Aquarantia alive for multiple turns and have lots of coin generation, then it's possible to play an extra card every single turn, which would be absolutely insane. Now that would require a fair bit of setup, with both cards that earn and spend coins, so once again, Bounty looks like a good fit, as well as Open Sesame, In Search of Forgotten Treasures, coin-generating leader abilities, and any card with a huge profit ability. In fact, with a combination of some of those cards, it is theoretically possible to trigger that Vice ability twice on the same turn. That's definitely not easy, but if you can do that, then you could be playing way more cards than your opponent. So the high-end potential of the Aquarantia is ginormous. The interesting question here will be just how greedy people try to get with its setup, because it may be best just to prepare for 1 quick Vice trigger and treat anything else as a bonus, rather than going super high risk, high reward, and have your entire game plan fall apart if something goes wrong. But again, even if you don't trigger that Vice ability at all, at least you're still getting 12 points worth of value. So although that might be really disappointing if this immediately gets answered before it triggers the Vice, the low end still isn't even that bad. It's also interesting that the dramatic boat that they were using for all their promo materials was a Syndicate card all along, which I definitely did not expect. Then lastly, we have Captain Yago, a 7-power, 13-provision human pirate. On deploy, you will gain as many coins as you spent this turn. Then fee 1, boost an allied pirate by 1. So the captain is very expensive, and his 7 power alone is definitely not enough to make up for that. But interestingly, the way that you maximize the value on his deploy ability is by starting a turn with a lot of coins and spending a whole bunch of those coins before you play him. Then he basically refunds all those coins that you spent so that you can spend them all again, and if you need a spender to do that, then he can use his fee 1 ability to boost other pirates, which includes all the other units in this expansion, except for the Aquarantia, but you should still have plenty of targets for the Captain. But that coin dynamic makes it a little tricky to use him, because either you deliberately don't spend all of your coins on the turn before you play him, or any card that automatically generates coins at the end of your turn, like Tax Collector, Pearl Diver, Imk, or Eveline, could give you small but straightforward ways to set him up. You could also activate a coin-generating leader ability and spend the coins from that, or if you've put a bounty on one of your opponent's units, maybe you wait to destroy that card so that you can destroy it on the turn that you play Captain Yago, gain all the coins from the bounty, spend all those coins you got from the bounty, then play the Captain, but the big card to set him up would definitely be In Search of Forgotten Treasures, automatically getting you up to the maximum number of coins. But regardless of how you earned or spent those coins, when you play the Captain, you'll get all those coins back, giving you crazy tempo. So if Captain Yago refills all of your coins from 0 to 9, then he plays for about 16 points for 13 provisions, which still doesn't sound that good. Although technically it is still possible to get his deployability bigger than 9 coins, but you'd have to use a jackpot deck to make that useful, so that's probably not very realistic. Of course, he can still use that fee ability to give you some long-term value, but the reason why this card is a lot better than just 16 points is because when you set up Captain Yago correctly, you have a way to spend at least 18 points per turn, if not more, which means cards with vice abilities like the Deckhand can trigger those abilities numerous times. So if your opponent didn't think that Deckhand was a threat, suddenly it's gotten 6 points of boost in one turn. That means Ishora removes 3 of your opponent's lowest units, which is ridiculous. And if you can spend 2 more coins in one turn with either double Magpie, destroying a bounty unit, using a coin-generating leader ability, or triggering Open Sesame, then you could play 2 cards in one turn from the Aquarantia, which, as we said before, is unbelievable. So that's why, although Captain Yago by himself may not seem that good, and it does take a lot of setup to get the full value out of him, in a long round when you have a lot of those vice cards on the board, he becomes one of, if not the single best finisher in the entire game. Though if you don't need his fee ability because you already have a different spender on the board, then you might be able to save 2 provisions by using Siggy Reuben instead, as long as you have enough unique gang categories to power up his profitability. Though because none of these new cards have a gang category, that could be difficult to do. So overall, the new Syndicate cards give lots of new and interesting ways to complement existing cards, archetypes, and decks. There will definitely be lots of ways to combine these new cards with both bounty and hidden cash decks, though I'm curious to see what other ideas people have to mix these new cards with existing archetypes, especially because those vice abilities can theoretically work with almost anything. As is often the case for Syndicate, these cards are probably more difficult to use than the ones that we've seen for other factions, and because they're less straightforward, a lot of people may underrate them, and we probably won't see as many people play them. But that means that if you are able to master these cards, you could have a huge advantage over your opponent. So what do you think about the new Syndicate cards? Are you going to stick with the simple options like the Deckhand and Ishora? Will you get ambitious with the Aquarantia and Captain Yago? Or will you use them all together? And what archetypes do you think will work best with these cards? Let me know what you think. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.